Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. We have 12 bills on our hearing list today. We start with 3 bills related to property taxes, and then we will be hearing 9 bills related to election law. Reminding everyone about the 3-minute time limit, so please pay attention to the clock. And also to those who are listening to YouTube, who are also in our waiting room. If you're coming on or planning to speak, we need to ensure that your name in the waiting room matches how you signed up, so we know who you are. So please fix that if you're both in YouTube and the waiting room. We will start, as I said, with some property tax bills. We have a local bill from Anne Arundel County, House Bill 901. Delegate Bartlett, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Vice Chair Washington and members of the Ways and Means Committee. Historically, Anne Arundel County and the City of Annapolis haven't had an agreement as to the allocation of hotel tax revenues that are intended to go to various community organizations. House Bill 901 allows the Visitors Bureau to fall within county audit and to provide reports as to the allocation of the funds received. And if the reporting is not done, then the county has the authority to withhold the revenue. To that end, this is an oversight and transparency bill. It is also an allocation of funds. The county must distribute the funds as outlined above previously. The county may authorize the city to collect the revenue generated by the hotel tax and handle the distribution. If so, the city must distribute the revenue funds in the same manner the county would. That is 3% to the Annapolis Art and Public Places Commission, 3% to the Arts Council of Anne Arundel County, and 17% to the Visitor Bureau. The allocation to the Annapolis Art and Public Places is the new allocation. To address the need for proper oversight and to reallocate funds as stated, I urge a favorable vote on House Bill 901. This bill is on the agenda for a vote by the delegation on Friday, February 19th. We held a hearing on February 12th without opposition. Testifying in support was the Anne Arundel County Executive and the City of Annapolis Mayor. That concludes my testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Bartlett. Thank you for concise testimony. Does anyone have any questions for Delegate Bartlett? All right, thank you. Seeing no questions, we are done with the hearing on House Bill 901. We'll move on to Delegate Washington's bill, House Bill 954.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of this distinguished committee. For the record, Delegate Alonzo Washington here to brief Bill 954. This bill creates a statewide personal property tax exemption for community solar projects installed on rooftops. As the state of Maryland continues its commitment to prioritizing renewable energy, creating this exemption will be critical to further the impact of these projects. This bill will lower the local tax burden for community solar that is constructed on existing built environments, such as on building rooftops and over parking lots. The existing personal property tax exemption for net metered solar would be extended to these systems. My goal is that hosting community solar by leasing rooftops or parking lot space can become a viable supplemental revenue source for local businesses, nonprofits, and governmental entities. For these reasons, Madam Chair, I ask for a favorable report on this bill, and ask that, and I know that the advocates that are coming up next will be able to answer any of the technical questions on this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And you, Mr. Vice Chair, any questions for Delegate Washington? All right, thank you. Seeing none, go to the first people signed up. We have John Olszewski, Sr. I see you here, but you still have to unmute.
Is that better, Madam Chair?
That is.
Okay, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman Kaiser, Vice Chairman Washington, and distinguished members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is John Olszewski, Sr. for the record, and I represent Summit Ridge Energy. We're testifying today in favor of House Bill 954. This legislation will extend the personal property tax exemptions for non-metered solar systems to community solar systems. And community solar systems will create many benefits, and here are just a few. Number one, it will create affordable, clean, renewable energy for local citizens and businesses to tap into. Number two, it'll help address some of the recommendations that came out of the governor's report, task force report on renewable energy development and siting. And here are just a few of those recommendations. Number one, it will help preserve farmland, especially prime agricultural land that we're losing at an alarming rate. Second, it'll help meet the goals of a 40% reduction of carbon emissions of 26 levels by 2030. Third, it'll help incentivize an increase in rooftop projects. And another of the many benefits is that it'll help maintain a steady increase in growth of rooftop and community solar projects beyond 2028. And according to the task force members, this is essential that this be done. We've had discussions with MACO. I believe they agree with the intent of the legislation about the cost is what their concerns are. And we respectfully think the cost is stated higher than anticipated. We believe the cost is on paper only because if community solar projects don't get built out, the cost and prohibitive roadblocks, then these increases won't come to fruition. On the other hand, we believe that it will increase local generating revenue for the local jurisdictions by increasing the permit process where the building owners will have to pay for the permits through the local jurisdictions. It'll create temporary construction jobs. It'll create maintenance jobs. And these temporary jobs and maintenance jobs will help support the local economy. We also believe that the consequences that may affect these building owners in the future could be detrimental to local property taxes on these buildings if they become vacant because of, with individuals working from home now, companies going out of business and no longer needing office space. We just have concerns that these buildings become vacant and they go under, that they won't be producing property taxes. We also spoke with the Maryland Energy Administration. They have some concerns about the non-parasitic load language. We'll continue to work with them and the bill sponsors on both the House and Senate side to rectify that language. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 954. And I know Nate Greenberg from Summit Ridge, the Vice President of Business Development, will be coming up. And if you have any technical questions or other questions, he'll be able to answer those questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Robin Dutta.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Robin Dutta. I'm the Senior Manager of Market Development and Policy for SunPower Corporation. We're one of the oldest solar companies in the United States. We were founded in 1985, and we've been very active across residential, commercial, and now community solar system development over all of that time. Community solar having been a fairly new concept, especially here in Maryland, only being created in 2015, we've gotten more active in that space over the last couple of years. Just to give you a sense of our economic footprint in Maryland, we have put up solar for Macy's, Verizon, other Fortune 100 and 500 companies. We're developing solar for Baltimore County landfills and for the county on rooftops. And we're also developing community solar for WMATA at 3 different stations in Prince George's County. I'd like to echo our support and ask the committee for a favorable report on HB 954 and thank Vice Chair Washington for agreeing to sponsor this. We think that this is an opportunity for more on-site solar to be developed. When you're building out in a field, it's cheaper in a lot of ways than if you're dealing with the built environment, putting solar on rooftops, building entire structures as parking canopies, because of all the steel and all the additional engineering design elements that has to be put in place. By extending the property tax exemption, the personal property tax exemption that already exists for some on-site solar, in a lot of ways, this updates the code and also helps to level the playing field on development. It allows for geographic diversity of solar development, which is one of the goals of the Community Solar Pilot Program. And it also provides additional revenue sources for private entities and public entities. We're very proud that we're able to offer a non-traditional revenue source to WMATA, especially at a time when they need to have all the revenue that they can in order to meet the needs of the region. And I would just, like to say, in echoing what John Olszewski Sr. said, we have an opportunity to turn a revenue source that exists really on paper right now and really make it a practical revenue source for the towns and for the counties. There are not many community solar projects that are on the built environment, on rooftops, on canopies, and even just on site near load. And so we're hoping to be able to allow that to happen more. And with more projects should also bring more revenue. Again, I really thank you all for the opportunity to testify and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll take two more and then some questions. Nathan Greenberg.
Good afternoon, Chairman Kaiser, Vice Chairman Washington, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Nate Greenberg, Vice President at Summit Ridge Energy, and we are here in support of Vice Chairman Washington's legislation HB 954. Summit Ridge Energy develops, owns, and operates community solar projects around the nation. We are one of the leaders in the Maryland community solar market. Of our 16 Maryland community solar projects with reserved capacity in the program, we are working in earnest to develop 11 of these on industrial rooftops. This includes a project that, if built, will be not only the largest rooftop community solar project in the United States, but one of the top 10 largest rooftop solar projects around the world, right here in Maryland. Summit Ridge Energy is making a real effort to follow the guidance laid out by last year's Governor's Task Force on solar siting and to develop more community solar projects on rooftops. These projects are not without their challenges, though. High rent rates and lower solar production put them at a disadvantage to ground-mounted solar projects. Construction costs are often higher than solar projects built on the ground. Building owners are often hesitant to host these systems for fear the additional rental income could increase their building property taxes. HB 954 helps ease those barriers to entry and will stimulate strong growth of the Maryland rooftop community solar market. As word spreads among building owners that leasing their roofs to community solar projects is a great way to earn additional rental income on otherwise unusable space, especially after the tough year so many had in 2020, the demand to host these projects continues to increase exponentially. Unfortunately, the tax uncertainty surrounding these kinds of projects is a major barrier to development. The passage of HB 954 will put Maryland in a position to capture this demand and catapult itself to being one of the leading rooftop community solar markets in the country. In closing, I thank you all for your time today and urge the passage of HB 954. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we next have David Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate Vice Chair Washington's leadership for this important bill. My name is David Murray. I serve as Executive Director of the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association. We represent the 4,500 solar workers here in the state of Maryland. I know this bill can at first seem complex, but in essence, I can distill it down in just a couple sentences. Right now, if you put a solar array on a business and that array is only powering the business, it is exempt from personal property tax. Yet, if we were to put the same array on the same rooftop and have that array also supply power through a community solar arrangement to homeowners and businesses in the same region, it would now be liable for personal property tax. Now, and again, this sounds very strange, and so that's why I think when we consider how we make more and more solar on rooftops and parking canopies in the built environment, this idea is the way to go. It is a very important that we clarify Maryland's current law such that community solar arrays on rooftops, such as parking canopies and other commercial structures, are exempt from personal property tax. This not only will help maximize our solar deployment on rooftops, but it will also support our community solar program, which is vital to ensuring that people like me, folks that don't own their own home, rent, live in a shaded area, or live in an apartment building, are able to leverage the full cost benefits of solar power. And so with that, I strongly urge a favorable vote on HB 954, and again, applaud the committee's leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Are there any questions for the four who signed up in favor?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Delegate Long.
Yes, ma'am. My Zoom is not working. I do not have no functions at all.
Well, we can all hear you. Do you have any questions or have you been able to hear the testimony?
Yes, I've been able to hear most of it. I've been logging in and logging back, logging off and logging back in.
All right.
Was, is this going to create a mandate for local jurisdictions?
It's a good, if anyone can answer that question.
But by mandate, and I can turn it over to the sponsor too, what it is it's clarifying that community solar arrays are exempt from local property taxes. So there's some ambiguity right now in Maryland law, whereby how a system is interconnected to the grid. It's unclear whether or not those systems are liable for personal property taxes.
All right, the other question I had was, there was something about parasitic. I've been trying to read the bill and logging in and Zoom on and off, but it was something I think Johnny Shevsky Sr. had mentioned, something about a problem with acidic or something, parasitic.
You want to take that, Robin?
Yeah, sure. I can provide that answer to you, sir. This is actually a little bit technical language regarding solar. The bill language allows for systems that are cited where there is, and the phrase is the non-parasitic load would still receive the property tax treatment of the rooftop and the canopy systems. This is in reference to if you have a structure already and you're putting the solar down. I think a good example is an office campus or an apartment complex. You're going to have a rooftop, maybe a canopy, but there's also going to be a little bit of open land that you might be able to develop solar on. It's on the same parcel. It's right near the load. And what you're then allowing is that extra bit of the system to receive the same tax treatment. So because it's right near and could serve the load if it were behind the meter, as David Murray was saying, it would receive that exemption. And so this language is meant to allow that to be treated in the same way, even though it's not directly on a rooftop or a parking canopy. It's not to deal with any systems that are in a field, but really meant to deal with where you have a system that's on a parcel where you have a building that already has electric load.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Long. Any other questions for the proponents? Next, we have Kevin Canelli from MACO, favorable with amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. You have my written testimony here today in support with amendments of House Bill 954. And I would like to make a few points. So first of all, MACO certainly appreciates the bill's flexibility with personal property tax rates on solar energy equipment, as many counties are interested in promoting solar development on gray fields, brown fields, and less desirable lands as alternatives to the large-scale projects that you see sometimes on prime ag lands. However, and Delegate Long asked, is this a mandate on local governments? It's absolutely a mandate on local governments. The bill is not clarifying. To be clear, it creates a broad new exemption. And if you read the bill's fiscal note, local personal property tax revenues would decrease by about $3.5 million. Even more concerning, as these projects come online and become more viable, the potential decrease in local property tax revenues from this exemption will be substantially higher than it is currently estimated. So MACO urges amendments here to authorize rather than mandate a personal property tax exemption for this solar property. And then also we'd like to strike the language that prohibits ESTAT from considering the income attributable to these community solar energy generating systems when determining the value of a property. The bottom line on this bill is this: the solar industry already has the belt, right? The state has to embed clean energy in the portfolio. They already have the suspenders. The state law basically says they don't have to even follow local zoning. The explosion of solar facilities is coming, there's no doubt about it. And now the industry wants a tax cut. This is not about competitiveness, it's simply about profit. Ignore the value of your property, pay artificially low taxes, and reap the profits, all at the expense of schools, public health, public safety, and other essential services upon which all county residents depend. Counties stand ready to work with policymakers to develop flexible and optionable tools to create broad or targeted tax incentives, but we certainly resist state-mandated changes that preclude local input. The bottom line is, if the state wants to create these incentives, that's fine, but it shouldn't do it on the backs of counties and their revenues. and we'd ask for a favorable with amendments report on House Bill 9.
Thank you, Mr. Canelli. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the opposition. We have Justin Fiore here with Maryland Municipal League.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Justin Fiore. I'm a government relations manager with Maryland Municipal League here today in opposition to House Bill 954. I'm going to share my colleague from MACO's frustration here. This is just bad timing. Our budgets are already challenged by the pandemic, which now includes helping our shared residents through the relief bill. And now the industry is coming to the General Assembly to mandate local governments provide another subsidy to this industry. Just can't stomach that right now, and I strongly urge you to give this bill an unfavorable report.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Fiore? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we are done with the hearing on House Bill 954. Mr. Vice Chair, we're moving on to House Bill 852.
Yes, House Bill 852, Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you. All right. I want to thank you all. This is my bill, House Bill 852, in my continuing effort to do more to reduce tax sales of homes for those with low income. And over the years, I've been trying to do things to increase transparency, increase notices. We've created an ombudsman, and anything we can do to help particularly older low-income homeowners who lose their homes. As the bill references on page 7, we're creating a program here to divert vulnerable homeowners from being caught up in tax sale. And why is this so important? As I've been learning over the years, someone could have a tax bill as low as $50 or even something just a few $100s, but something they can't afford. Before they know it, there might be excessive fees and other things that happen in the process and a lot of different forms. And I'm someone who has trouble reading forms myself, so I know it can be a challenge for all people. But the real crazy thing that can happen is that someone who has lived in their home for 30 or 40 years might have equity of $60,000, $70,000, and guess what happens? They lose it all. And this is not right. And so what we're trying to do here is really create a new program to divert, again, the vulnerable homeowners, older and very low income homeowners. And just to step back, when I've talked about the things we've done before, we're also trying to do through this bill and others, ensuring that people know about all the different tax credit programs they're eligible for. We create these great programs in state government, and then not everyone who could apply does. And it's a real shame that that happens. So in creating this program, it is true that we had to create a source of funds to allow for the counties to be involved with some of these tax sale purchases. And right now, we have a 0.1% on the state transfer tax of any property over $1 million, 0.1%, plus a $25 fee on each tax lien. This will bring in over $3 million a year to help with this program, certainly open to other sources. You will hear today from advocates, and you will hear from opponents of the legislation. And last week, I was on the phone with some of those opponents, and at the beginning of the conversation with them, Mr. Ward was on the call with me as well. They were saying that this would kill the tax sale industry and that this would put them all out of business. Later in that same conversation, more than one person said to me, why are you even bothering with these low-income vulnerable homeowners? You've already done things to help them, and prior bills, there's really very few of them left that haven't been helped. And I said, wait, which is it? Are we killing the industry, or is this too small and only a few homeowners? So this would still be allowed on commercial property. This would still be allowed, tax sales would still be allowed on higher income or higher property value individuals. Again, just not on low income older individuals. So I ask you all to support House Bill 852. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any questions for the chair to sponsor the bill? Seeing none, let's go into our, oh, okay, Delegate Buckle, brave man. Go ahead.
I had a question, and I apologize. I just had a bill hearing in judiciary, so came in for the end. But I did want to ask, Madam Chair, my notes or my recollection of the bill, this applies for houses that have a assessed value, was it $300,000?
Yes, it's under 300,000 and I think income lower than 60,000.
Right.
As with any of these things, we could adjust it and make it different. I think you might be suggesting maybe different for different areas.
Something like that. My only consideration is that in Allegheny County, you would probably be capturing, I'm spitballing, but I don't think I'm too far off. You would probably be capturing 85 to 90% of the homes, the single family homes would have an assessed value of 300,000 or less. And so that would be my only concern. My county, there might be 5 or 6 other counties, 8 or 9 that might fit that, where you'd really be eliminating the ability, and we don't probably have the funding to do that, right? Like the funding's limited, so we'd have all these potential qualifiers. So that's just something to think about, is maybe that $300,000 marker for assessed value wouldn't play the same across the full state.
I appreciate that. And I think this program it really allows people to apply. And, that's something for the subcommittee to consider. I hate first come, first serve in any program. So it should be means tested, and maybe that means testing should include some local variable, though certainly it has to be the same standard across the state. But
Yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go to our first speaker. We're going to start with Councilmember Odette Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone in the committee. I'm Odette Ramos. I'm the councilwoman for the 14th District in Baltimore City. It's great to see all of you and work with you in my new role. I'm very excited about this. And I have taken on tax sale full on here in Baltimore in my new role, introducing legislation to create, making sure that we can do payment plans on our property taxes, as well as installment plans for arrears. So we're taking it on full on, and I'm so excited that Madam Chair has put in this piece of legislation, because it helps us so much in Baltimore. The chair already explained, how tax sale works, and all of you are very familiar with it. I just want to let you know that in last year's tax sale in Baltimore City, there were a little over 3,500 families that were listed initially, and then 1,400 homeowners went into actual tax sale. And this year, I just got the list of the homeowners who own their homes for 25 years or more, and their total tax bill is about $400,000. And so we're not talking about things that are insignificant. We're talking about families and elders who no longer have mortgages, who don't pay their taxes monthly, that are getting caught in this. And particularly in the time of COVID, we are seeing that many of our seniors are actually helping out their families so that they don't have always the money for the taxes. We also know that, and as Madam Chair explained, that sometimes a bill as low as $1,000 ends up being redeemed at $2,500. It is a predatory process. And I'm excited to have this bill to be as part of a strategy for addressing that issue. When the state purchases the liens, then the relationship around who's collecting the taxes is between the homeowner and the state, and not the homeowner and an investor. And so I'm excited about this bill. And again, a lot of our homeowners are in various different situations. I have a constituent who has multiple liens on her garage because she couldn't fix her garage. So in Baltimore, we include liens and environmental liens in our tax sale as well. So I look forward to working with all of you on this legislation and in tax sale reform in general. It's very important that we work to make sure that our elders are not in complete stress about how they're being able to pay their taxes, making it easier to pay the taxes, making sure that the homeowner's tax credit is available for everyone, and also that we have a much more humane humane way of collecting our taxes and not in this predatory way. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all my colleagues here, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to our next speaker. We're going to have Margaret Hen. Margaret Hen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser and members of the committee. My name is Margaret Hen, and I'm the Director of Program Management at Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service is the largest pro bono legal services provider in the state. We provide legal services to those who are facing financial hardship on a variety of civil legal issues. And over the past 4 years, we have represented over 450 people who are facing tax sale. One of the things that I want to stress about the tax sale system as it currently is that this is a system that is not equitable. Over 75% of the clients that we serve for tax sale each year are Black. That's 75%. The current system is one that strips Black families and communities of the homes that they have worked hard to attain. In addition to that, as the chair said, the tax sale system disproportionately affects those who are struggling the most financially. More than half of our clients are older adults on a fixed income, usually a very small amount of Social Security that they get. 30% have reported to us that they have a disability, and the average homeowner that we help has a household income of just $30,000, from which they're usually trying to come up with a tax payment of $1,000 or $2,000 or more sometimes. In my written testimony, I tell the story of Estelle, who's one of our tax sale clients who almost lost her home because she didn't receive a tax credit for which she was eligible. I just want to stress that her story is not unique. The homeowner's property tax credit, which does provide assistance to households making $60,000 a year or less, is not well known in the community and is incredibly underutilized because of that. The State Tax Sale Ombudsman Office put out a report in 2020 in which they reported that they directed 368 Marylanders who didn't know about the credit to apply for it, and there was an additional 499 people that they assisted who unfortunately came to that office too late to get the credit and had to be referred to us at Legal Services or Housing Counseling or other types of services because it was too late for the credit and they couldn't avoid being thrown into the predatory tax sale system. So in response to some of the opponents of this bill that their claim that there would be a very small number of people affected, that's about 900 people across the state, not just in one jurisdiction, who came to that office seeking help and were helped by the State Tax Sale Ombudsman. And I'm sure there are many more that didn't know about that office and weren't able to access help. So this really is an issue that affects thousands of homeowners still, even with all the protections that have been put into place. I just wanted to hit upon two of the major hurdles that prevent many of our clients from getting out of tax sale. One of them is that these clients could be getting the homeowner's property tax credit, and they're not. So this credit is on a sliding scale, but it can save our clients hundreds or sometimes even thousands a year in taxes if they are properly enrolled in the credit. The second major hurdle is that once our clients fall behind, it's very hard for them to come up with a lump sum to pay all the taxes they owe.
Ms. Hen?
Yes.
Ms. Hen, your time is up. Can you say your last sentence, please?
Sure. So I just wanted to say that I strongly support HB 852. I think it addresses both of those hurdles that I just mentioned. And
Thank you very much. Yep. Okay. Next we'll have Kevin Canelli, and then we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Kevin Canelli here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of House Bill 852 with an amendment. You have my written testimony. I'll make a few points. Number one is that I genuinely appreciate Chair Kaiser's commitment to this issue and for working with MACO over the past few interims to produce data on the tax sale process at the local level. Of course, no jurisdiction wants to send any property to tax sale if it can be avoided, and MACO strongly prefers that homeowners receive all counseling, education, information, and support for which may be available to them, as well as additional assistance to help them pay on time and avoid going through tax sale. I mean, to that end, we think this bill is a very novel and innovative approach, and we support the bill as a way to facilitate access to support services at a time when it is most needed and helpful. However, we do understand that the bill needs a revenue source, and we understand that some are concerned about those provisions of the bill. And so the amendment really is that we're hoping to work with the committee and with all the relevant stakeholders to further refine this process, balancing the interest of property owners, investors, and local governments. So we respectfully request that the committee consider the need to collect revenues to fund essential public services fairly and efficiently when evaluating the many interests and needs involved in this process. With that, we support House Bill 852. We hope to be at the table to work on this bill, work out some of the concerns, and we'd ask for a favorable report with an amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you all. We'll go to our next speakers, Justin Fiore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Again, my name is Justin Fiore with the Maryland Municipal League. Here today supporting House Bill 852 with amendments for many of the reasons you've already heard and are included in our written testimony. I also just want to thank the chair real quick for reaching out to us well in advance of this session. That was very much appreciated. We are only asking for what we believe to be a clarifying or technical amendment to ensure municipal governments are properly included. And with that, we urge a favorable report.
Oh, got some of the best testimony I've heard, man. I love it. All right. Our next speaker we'll have is Dan Ellis.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Ellis. I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Baltimore, and I co-chaired the Baltimore City Tax Sale Work Group for 8 years. I'd like to thank Chairwoman Kaiser for her leadership on this issue and her passion and desire to really help the most vulnerable Marylanders. Over the last 20 years of doing community development in Baltimore, tax sale is one of the most exploitive systems that I have encountered. And that's actually saying something. It was developed many, many years ago in the state to take, and what it does is it takes wealth away from low-income Marylanders who are often homeowners and transfers it to people who have means to be able to purchase these loans. Currently, many of the folks who are buying and investing in these are coming from out of state. In Baltimore City, the impact is pretty extraordinary on some of our communities. In the tax sale that was completed recently in July, there was $15.2 million of liens that were purchased at the tax sale. Of those, 5.7 million, according to the state ombudsman report, were from owner-occupied properties, which meant that $9.5 million was not owner-occupied. But what that means is this program is not going to put tax sale purchasers out of business or the tax sale industry out of business in any way. What it will do is it will help the most vulnerable residents of Maryland to be able to have another option to go to for support. That's what it does. And it's going to help all jurisdictions of the state. We're open to conversations as Delegate Buckle raised about the right caps and the right levels and what makes sense and ways that we can create a quantifiable way to make it fair and equitable for everybody. But it provides protections for homeowners. It allows the state ombudsman to help connect them to existing state programs that work when people are connected to them. Maryland is one of the strongest states at providing support to their low-income residents, for which we greatly appreciate and is a model around the country. But many residents aren't able to access it because of a lack of knowledge. And so having a program like this helps them to connect to those services and provides an additional layer of support for those who are most in need. And it also doesn't bring about the negative impact on local government because local government is kept whole through the compensation that is provided. And through other models that we have seen, it provides a lot of sustainability over time for the program. And so it's a way to help homeowners without having significant fees increase on the program. So House Bill 852 is a critical step to removing injustice that is impacting many people in Maryland. We look forward to working with Chairwoman Kaiser and members of the committee to implement the bill, and we request a favorable report on House Bill 852. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Next speaker we'll have is that's the last favorable speaker. So are there any questions for these speakers, witnesses? Seeing none, thank you all very much. We'll have our next set of speakers who are unfavorable on this bill. Bradley Westover.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Kaiser and Vice Chair Washington and committee members for the opportunity to testify on tax sales and home ownership protections. My name is Brad Westover. I'm the Executive Director of the National Tax Lien Association, which was founded in 1997. The NTLA is the nonprofit watchdog to protect property owner rights and fair tax sale systems in America. The NTLA does not support HB 852 for the following reasons, and there's 6 of them that I want to point out. Number 1, Maryland law has safeguards already in place to protect vulnerable homeowners that's low income, elderly, or disabled to withhold these delinquent taxpayers from the tax sale. That's in your tax code 14-811F. Number 2, Maryland counties rely upon tax sales to recoup lost revenue from the non-payment of property taxes. Nationally, $15 billion per year in property taxes become delinquent. The NTLA estimates that over $200 million is recouped annually by tax sales for Maryland counties. And the services they provide, namely teachers, schools, fire, police, roads, health departments, etc. Not collecting this revenue creates 2 problems. Number 1, it increases the tax burden on current taxpayers. Number 2 is it will cut the funding to vital services needed to stabilize communities and avoid blight. Number 3, the NTLA Foundation was formed 3 years ago that I created, and it exists solely for one purpose: to save vulnerable homeowners from losing their homes to a tax foreclosure. We promote the foundation to every single tax collector and treasurer in the United States. The actual number of owner-occupied homeowners facing eviction from their homes is less than 0.5% of the total number of delinquent taxpayers. So in essence, 99.95% of taxpayers eventually pay their taxes in order to avoid tax foreclosure. And the other thing that's notable is most tax foreclosed properties are on vacant land and abandoned properties. Number 4, if passed, the penalties and interest would continue to accrue, creating a deeper hole for delinquent taxpayers, which would increase the likelihood of non-payment and tax foreclosure. Making any reductions in interest or penalties would create an even greater number of delinquent taxpayers, as current taxpayers would selectively opt not to pay their taxes because of the lesser penalty, ultimately causing a greater financial burden on Maryland counties. It is a double-edged sword. Both sides promote negative outcomes. Only 50% of the Maryland counties conducted tax sales last year. Kicking this can down the road further is like rolling the snowball downhill. It is going to grow and eventually hurt more people than it will that won't be able to recover from another year of back taxes. Number 5, asking the State Department of Assessment and Taxation to assume the role of tax collector rather than the
Mr. Westover, your time is up. You mind
Sure.
I said this for us, please?
Sure. I just want to close with this. I want to thank Chairman Kaiser and the entire committee. I applaud the work you do, especially for the intention of protecting vulnerable homeowners. In that respect, we are 100% unified. That's the very reason I created the foundation, and I look forward to working with the committee as needed to make sure that we do 2 things. Number 1.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Neil Eskin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Neil Eskin, and I am a member of the Maryland Tax Sale Participants Association, which works to ensure the Maryland tax sale process is efficient, effective, and equitable for all parties. We are in favor of more helpful noticing and tax credits, but the tax sale process is a much needed tool of last resort to ensure property owners remit payment for their share of taxes connected to public services. And the main thing to keep in mind is that current Maryland law already grants authority to the various counties and municipalities to take out from tax sale homeowners who are low income, at least 65 years old, disabled if the homeowner meets eligibility criteria established by the counties. There's also a number of other bills that have recently passed in recent years that have significantly helped homeowners avoid tax sale. So this bill, in essence, puts an unreasonable and unrealistic expectation on the State Department of Assessments and Taxation to become the new tax collector for tax delinquent homeowners, thereby increasing costs and potentially causing significant revenue losses. Additionally, this bill requires tax lien purchasers to pay a non-reimbursable fine for each purchased tax lien, and this will significantly reduce private participants from investing in Maryland tax sales, thereby increasing the likelihood that counties and municipalities will be stuck with significant tax delinquencies. So even though the bill targets vulnerable homeowners, it's still affecting the overall tax sale space in Maryland, which is providing all counties with needed revenue. So this will ultimately affect county budgets and revenue and the ability to fund necessary and needed community programs. Lastly, this bill is, we believe, based on a false narrative that most homeowners who enter tax sale will likely lose their home. The attorneys in the Maryland Tax Sale Participants Association, who have decades of combined experience, can ascertain that the number of actual foreclosures that occur on homeowner properties is extremely nominal. Further, most homeowners pay off the delinquent taxes prior to fees and costs being incurred. So, and additionally, a lot of our members and affiliates have consistently worked out payment plans with struggling homeowners, assisted homeowners with reducing fees and costs, and in many cases, even forgiven the entire owed balance. So for these mentioned reasons, we oppose House Bill 852 and urge the unfavorable report, and we're open to some amendments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eskin. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you both. Our next two panelists, we have Heidi Kenney and Anthony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Washington, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Heidi Kenney. I am an attorney, and my family is one of the largest tax sale investors in Maryland. We are not an out-of-state bank or REIT investing our dollars in the state, but we are Maryland residents investing in our state and in our communities. I pulled, in preparation for the testimony today, I did pull data from our last 5 years of tax sale investing. We purchased approximately 7,200 liens. Out of that 7,200, 86% have redeemed. 5% have been voided by the counties or the city in reference to that it should have never taken place in tax sale, and they voided the certificate altogether. 8%, I'm still waiting. They're active in that the final disposition of those properties hasn't occurred yet, because those are the remainder 2019 and 2020 liens that are still currently active that we haven't had the disposition of. About less than 1.5% we write off. So we are paying those people's taxes without any qualifications and writing off those liens in their entirety. Out of the 7,200 liens that we've purchased, 19 over the last 5 years we foreclosed upon. 2 out of those 19 may, and I emphasize may, because as the current bill is written, they would not have qualified for this program, but they may have been considered homeowner occupied. They were not evicted. We have just not received any response or communication from what would be considered a homeowner. The service of process on these individuals did not take place at the subject property of the foreclosure. So out of our 19 properties, that represents 0.25% that were foreclosed upon, and 10% of that 0.25% may be defined as a homeowner occupied under the current statute. I say that because no, the current bill is proposed is not going to put us out of business. And therefore, I would say that how it is written is incentivizing owners not to pay their taxes, considering that the majority of people do pay their taxes based on the current tax sale process. The bill states that priority is given to anyone over the age of 60, but the qualifications and the scope of this bill apply across the board to anyone of any age. So I would recommend that amendments be made to quantify and narrow the scope of who this bill is intended to protect. And in that instance, we would then be in support of it. But the amount of money needed to fund and maintain this program far outweighs the number of properties that the bill is intended to protect. And that is where my largest concern lies with the current bill. The funding of fining tax sale investors is problematic by imposing a $25.
Ms. Kenney, can you summarize, please?
Certainly. I would request the committee vote against the bill and provide time to implement a bill that accomplishes the goal and intentions behind it without the astronomical costs associated with its implementation and maintenance. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 more speakers, then we'll take questions. Mr. Anthony Onwanibe.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Anthony Onwanibe, and I'm an attorney out in Baltimore City. You got the pronunciation.
Thanks, brother.
And I primarily represent small and medium-term tax sale investors. I represent people that buy 1 or 2 liens, the mom and pops, and represent people that buy maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen itself. And what, as Mr. Eskin was saying, is that there's a false narrative that these tax liens are predatory, and then they go against the investors trying to take people's properties. But mainly, most of the tax sales that we deal with are investors that buy properties from their neighboring their neighbors. They've had a neighboring property that was abandoned, and they go to the city, and the city says, "Hey, why not buy the property in tax sale and renovate it and do that itself?" So most of it are like that. And I was looking at the last 5 years, and I do probably with these mom and pop tax sales, I do probably 200-300 a year. And I was looking at in the last 5 years of how many homeowners have I actually evicted? How many? And in the last 5 years, the answer is none. And not that I do not do evictions. I do evictions as a practice, as my practice, but the answer is none. And the reason being is that most of the homeowners pay, and most of them pay before the fees incur. So most of the percentage of people that actually lose their homes are very, very small, very, very small. And most of the homeowners pay. And as I was saying about the evictions, there was one property in the last 5 years. And what happened just before we finalized everything, legal aid came in and assisted the person. So there's not only are there a lot of there's a lot of help for the homeowners itself. We don't feel I'm unfavorable to the bill because we don't feel that having another system in place will do any work. It will do much better. In fact, it will just incentivize people to not pay their taxes, and that's not what the counties need. These properties need these taxes for their revenue, as we pointed out right here. So essentially, the bill is the false narrative that comes out of the tax sale is that it's predatory, and it's not predatory. People, it's just we look at it as just like a nudge to people to pay their taxes. They've got a lot of notices. They've got a lot of notices.
Mr. Onwanibe, I hope I said that right this time again. Your time is up. Do you mind summarizing for us, please?
Yes, thank you. So essentially, it's unfavorable. We like the bill unfavorable. I'm reporting the bill is unfavorable. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. For our last speaker, we have Susan Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Susan Mitchell here on behalf of the Maryland Realtors. You have our written testimony, so I'll try to be brief. While Maryland Realtors wholeheartedly supports the Housing Protection Program approach to help vulnerable homeowners, we respectfully oppose HB 852 currently as written. If funding this program is important for everyone in the state, then not just a select few who are buying or selling property should carry the costs. We believe it should be more broad-based funding and have suggested an alternative approach using funding over and above local government's constant yield revenue, perhaps. Currently, Maryland has an average 8% increase again this year in assessments. Given the increase in assessments, counties will be receiving even more revenue funding. Again, Maryland Realtors appreciates the intent of the Homeownership Protection Program, however, must oppose 852 as written and encourages an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Smith for the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this can be answered rather by anybody, particularly those who are close to actually, acquiring these liens. I believe that might be Ms. Kenney and someone whose name begins with an O, and I do not want to say incorrectly out of respect for the pronunciation of his name. So sorry about that, sir. But I guess for me, I feel like I'm hearing a couple different things. So if you could provide some clarity, it'd be most appreciated. This bill is, I think we've all kind of arrived at laser focused on owner-occupied homes that are particularly vulnerable and having challenges around satisfying the tax lien. So I understand and appreciate the anecdotal offerings that perhaps in your professional experience, you have not been a party to or involved in an eviction. But it seems that on one hand, there's an acknowledgement that it does happen, albeit in rare instances. But I feel like I'm hearing that we shouldn't be addressing those rare instances simply because they're rare, not because they don't pose an incredible hardship, profound hardship, not only on the owner themselves, but particularly on their families and those that depend on that residence for support. So I guess to me, I feel like I'm hearing there isn't a problem or the problem's too small to address. And I guess, I think we as policymakers are trying to figure out, you're obviously not worried about being on the street, but are you saying a bill to address that very discrete, kind of population is unworthy of being assessed? I feel like that's what I'm hearing, but please, set me straight if that's not what I'm hearing.
I can answer that if what I'm saying is that the cost of the funding for this is more, it's going to cost more to fund and operate this program than just paying those vulnerable homeowners taxes. So that's the issue I'm having. It's that minuscule population of people, but the implementation and the maintenance of this program that it's creating is like it's like, I would rather just have this money as a Maryland taxpayer. I'd rather you just pay the taxes and not create this program. That's kind of where that's the angle of my testimony.
Got it. Thank you very much.
I would add, if I could, that
Mr. Eskin, go ahead.
Thank you. I would add by saying that Maryland law already has a statute that allows any county, every single county, Baltimore City included, to take out from tax bill any vulnerable homeowner who is low income, at least 65 years old or disabled, and each county could have their own criteria set up. And in addition, the way the bill's written, it encompasses every homeowner who has a property that's $300,000 or less and making combined income of $60,000 or less. But then it also mentions we'll also give priority to more vulnerable individuals. So if that was the case, if it was really just specific to the vulnerable individuals, maybe we could work something out, but it's encompassing a lot more than that.
Thank you very much. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I guess my question is for someone who actually kind of administers this, maybe Mr. Anyuabi. Even though the number of these properties might be, as you said, de minimis, they represent a huge amount of income if you are able to get title to the property. I actually had a friend / constituent contact me by the name of Jeffrey Doobie that was involved in a transaction with you. And I think all told, he ended up having to spend around $30,000-$40,000 for a tax lien that was an error, went over by a year. So in the rare cases where you do get these properties, it can represent a tremendous payday for you. So is that the reason that you don't want to see this little part of it go away, even though it's de minimis and the number of times that it happens, it can translate to a huge payday?
Thanks for the question, but I don't believe that there are out there investors that are out there that make money from the tax sales. So I'm not going to deny that investors do not make money, but that's the real reason is that the bill does not. We believe the bill wouldn't accomplish the goals it set out to accomplish, because what it will essentially do, it will provide an incentive for people not to pay their taxes. We're saying that the problem is such that there's so few people that go through this, and there's already legislation in place to take care of the most vulnerable homeowners among us. I'm not sure of the situation that you specified that had dealt with me by itself, but in most cases, the homeowners redeem before any fees can be incurred by the attorney. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing for House Bill 852. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We'll now turn to the election law part of our afternoon. So 9 further bills. We next have Delegate Weibel with House Bill 746.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Washington, and honorable members of the committee. It's good to be with you to present House Bill 746. Regardless of which side of the aisle you may be on, I think that we can all agree that last year's elections were somewhat unique, and that was mainly due to the pandemic. I heard from quite a few constituents who were concerned about the integrity of the election and the privacy of their vote when they were voting by mail. We all heard the reports of ballots being discarded in an improper manner. So my intent of this bill was to keep the voter information private to all except those in the election office. All this bill does in its present form is hide the party affiliation from being on the exterior of the envelope. I would prefer the only information on the exterior of the envelope is a barcode, however, and the envelope flap would cover the remainder. I was advised by the Board of Elections that they do need to see certain information on the envelope exterior. So all that I was really able to get out of them was the party affiliation. If the committee is inclined to move the bill forward, I'm willing to move it in its present form or amend it that it require only the barcode is visible on the exterior. That's it. It's a pretty simple bill on its face. I thank you for your time and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Weibel. I do have a question. I first want to mention that I in fact heard of no one throwing out ballots in the state of Maryland. No real issues with that. So when the Board of Elections, did they give you any reason for why party is currently there? Because I agree with you, people deserve their privacy when they mail things out.
They did not, and they were actually agreeable to removing that.
Okay, thank you very much. There are other questions. Delegate Hornberger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this was something that I noticed over the interim as well. It's not that you're insinuating that someone at Board of Elections would do something nefarious. It's maybe a mail carrier or maybe someone that's rifling through mailboxes, et cetera. I know where I live in a rural community, our mail is constantly going through because the mailbox is hundreds and hundreds of yards away from the house. Is that your concern, Delegate Weibel?
Correct. As I indicated, I'd like to keep it private to everyone except those in the election office. So
great.
You're right. I mean, any any number of people have an opportunity to handle mail.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Delegate Buckle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I think Delegate Hornberg kind of hit to the point. I just wanted to confirm that with Delegate Weigel. I look at this more as independent of any aspect of fraud or potential fraud. It's simply advancing our policy to let people's ballots be secret, to let them be secure, just like what we used to do. Now, when I was a little kid, I was in the booth with my mother, and they pulled a curtain behind you, and you flipped the little thing. No one knew what you did. Now that we have mail-in voting, with this one simple little change, would help people to maintain sort of that secrecy, that privacy to who they are, their political affiliation, who they're voting for. Is that what you're going for?
That's correct, Delegate. And actually, the one person who was most vocal with me about this was an elderly lady who was actually quite offended that her voter information was displayed on the outside of the envelope.
Thank you, Delegate.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, there is no one signed up on this bill. Thank you, Delegate Weigel. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 746. We're on to House Bill 767 from the Montgomery County Delegation. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero, we see that you're there. All right. I guess it's not listening in. Delegate Mangione, go ahead with House Bill 895.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Kaiser, and of course, members of the committee. I'm presenting House Bill 895, election law, polling places at continuing care retirement communities, of course, in hopes of a favorable vote. HB 895, this was actually presented last year, and it was cross-filed by Senator Chris West last year as well. And the opposition, there was some, very little last year, but it was because it was applied statewide. This came to an end with coronavirus, of course, and we actually, for this year, did have or put forth an amendment to make this a Baltimore County local bill, just for the record. So on the bill, just to refresh your memory, it basically deals with, we know how every campaign speech around election time, politicians like us, we love to talk about how much we can help our seniors. Well, HB 895 is a bill that does exactly that. It requires, again, only the Baltimore County Board of Elections to establish a separate precinct at certain continuing care retirement communities to serve as specific retirement communities. So just for the record, there are 12 CCRCs as of last year in Baltimore County, and it's important to know it would be their choice if they would like to opt in. And the bill imposes 3 conditions on the establishment of a polling place at the CCRC. Number 1, the CCRC must make the polling place available, and this is important, without charge to the local election board. Number 2, the polling place in the CCRC must meet all applicable requirements for a polling place under the state election code and the regulations issued by the State Board of Elections. And number 3 here, the CCRC must provide assistance to the local election board in recruiting election judges from among the residents of the CCRC to the staff at the polling place, or to staff the polling place. Condition number 3 is important to note that most residents of CCRCs are elderly but remain very active. This is the reason that CCRCs are being suggested and not nursing homes or assisted living facilities where residents are a bit more infirm and much less likely to be able to withstand the physical taxing duties of manning a polling place during an election day. So with the number of CCRCs in my district, I've spoken firsthand with seniors who continue. Of course, we all know the seniors are very active with civic engagement. A lot of them prefer to vote in person. And of course, with age, unfortunately, creating a physical barrier for some, and unpredictability. We know, like weather, for example, we've seen that in just the past couple of weeks here, especially around election time come November. Voting can be a serious challenge to those seniors that hope to remain part of our electoral process. Currently in my district, Broadmead, which serves as a licensed CCRC, has a polling place located inside the facility. And most of the residents there vote because of this. And it's my hope we can have more CCRCs, making it more convenient for the residents. And just to add note, finally, of course, time and time again over the years, and let's just go back to a couple hours ago this very morning, where the legislature here has done much to remove barriers to voting in Maryland. We voted, I don't have the bill in front of me, but the one today that allows for the employees to go out during their work hours to vote. So this is just another example that makes it a bit easier. And I hope that this is a favorable bill. And again, it's a Baltimore County delegation, or the amendment makes it a Baltimore County only bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Mangione. Have you all taken a vote yet in Baltimore County?
No, so we added the amendment. I'm working with Chairman Pat Young with that, and we were texting back and forth to present the bill there. So we'll probably be presenting in delegation, I would imagine maybe this Friday, if not, probably next week.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the delegate? It's still not officially a local bill, so we do have some people signed up to testify. We'll start with Catherine Berry. Miss Berry, she's in the waiting room. Mr. Canelli, if you're there, can you start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin Canelli here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties. I want to thank Delegate Mangione for letting me know yesterday that the bill would be amended to be a local bill. And with that, MACO would drop its opposition to this bill. So again, thank you. With the tight testimony deadlines, I wasn't able to amend my testimony, but that amendment would address our concerns and our opposition to the bill.
Thank you so much. And you were a good time delay to get Ms. Berry here. Ms. Berry, your testimony on House Bill 895. You're still muted.
I apologize. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Berry. I am here representing the Maryland Association of Election Officials. I am the election director in Carroll County. We are here today to express opposition, specific concerns about the amount of space at being able to facilitate an infinite amount of polling places if many counties, I know there's the amendment for Baltimore County, but if all the other counties have to create a multitude of polling places, we have significant concerns about just where we are storing the equipment, because our warehouse spaces in our offices are getting smaller and smaller. And the other concern that we would like to express is with every new polling place that we have, we now will have a new additional ballot style. And so most jurisdictions are faced with between 100 and 800 ballot styles for the upcoming election. So we are just trying to relay our concerns about the space and the cost for having the space to be able to facilitate those things. So with that being said, I will yield the floor if there are any questions, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Berry or Mr. Canelli? Delegate Ebersole.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, given the bill is kind of open-ended, could you give me a sense of, for example, in Baltimore County, how many locations would be eligible for an additional polling place under this bill? Do you have any kind of a guess or a ballpark figure?
Thank you, Delegate Ebersole. Yeah, I had it here right in front of me, but I can't find it, of course. I think there was something along the lines of, I want to say, I'll get that to you. I had it here. It'll take me a couple minutes to look. I want to say somewhere around 20 something. But
There are only 20 continuing care community.
Maybe 30. Let me get that offline to you, because I do have that here somewhere and I just misplaced it. So I have that information. I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Delegate Ebersole. Any other questions for Delegate Mangione? All right. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you to those who testified. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 895. we'll go back to the local bill, House Bill 767, Delegate Acevero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Delegate Gabriel Acevero here to present House Bill 767, which is a Montgomery County specific delegation bill. The bill, in essence, colleague, it is one enabling, but it would allow for our county council, if they so choose, to look at different voting methods. Voting methods to include approval voting, ranked choice voting, and to be able to select which best voting methods for local elections. And this is specific to Montgomery County. It is enabling legislation, and it in no way prescribes any specific voting method or system, but it allows for those who are duly elected by the people of Montgomery County to examine, to analyze, to discuss, and if they so choose, to then pass legislation that would allow for a voting method that would be convenient, that would allow for residents of Montgomery County to participate in their democracy, and for us to ensure that we see representative democracy certainly at the local level. There's certainly a number of organizations that support this. It enjoys local support from members of our county council. It's been supported unanimously by our delegation. It includes a number of things from approval voting to voter education, a number of things that would be specific to Montgomery County. And I ask for a favorable report from this committee so that we can allow for this kind of discussion if it so happens, and this decision to be made if that is the will of our county council. So with that, I ask for a favorable report, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Are there any questions? Delegate Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Acevero, has the delegation taken a position on this bill?
It has voted unanimously on the bill, Mr. Vice Chair.
And this is a local bill, right?
That is correct. It is specific to Montgomery County.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Delegate. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to House Bill 745. Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I think we learned a lot of lessons in the administration of last year's election. But one of the big takeaways I had from conversations with my constituents in particular was that voters like options. They liked having a lot of different options for how to cast their ballot. Regular voting, early voting, mail balloting, drop boxes. You know, for a while, as veteran members of the committee will know, I've been working on various issues related to the availability of early voting sites in particular. And over the last few cycles, we have seen continued increases in the percentage of our electorate that makes use of early voting. A lot of our voters really like early voting. I'll tell you personally, I love it. I vote early pretty much every time we have an election. But our law that defines how many early voting sites exist in each county is what the old legislative joke that a camel is a horse designed by committee. It's a little bit of a camel, and the numbers aren't necessarily fully. They don't make a whole lot of sense. They were the best decision, I think, at the time that the numbers were made. So what this bill attempts to do is to rationalize the numbers in law for how many registered voters need to be in a county and how that affects the number of early voting sites in a given county. I will commend to the members of the committee the fiscal note writer, because they did a very good job of laying out exactly how the bill works and what the results of the bill would be. So if you take a look at the fiscal note, it'll walk you through a couple of things. First of all, the thresholds for increasing early voting centers. Right now, if you have 125,000 voters, registered voters or fewer in your county, you're mandated to have one early voting site. Now, there's a big difference between a county that has 20,000 registered voters and 124,000 registered voters. And we have some counties in our state that are frankly geographically very, very large. What the bill does is it says if you have fewer than 50,000 registered voters, you have one early voting site. Between 50 and 100,000, you get a second early voting site. And then above that, for every, starting at 100,000, for every 100,000 additional registered voters, your county would have 2 additional early voting sites. To a maximum for our largest counties, that is our counties with the highest number of registered voters, would have 13 mandated early voting sites. Under the bill, counties would retain the option of adding an additional 1 early voting site if they so chose. Some counties did that last year to the great fanfare, I think, from voters that appreciated it. You'll also see in the fiscal note a description in detail of what this actually means for every county in the state, which counties would get an additional early voting site as a result of this bill, and also based on population projections, population growth projections, which counties would add additional sites in 2024 and 2026. And then going forward, of course, at some point, we'll have to revisit this conversation a few years down the line as counties continue to grow and the number of registered voters continue to grow and pressures on early voting change. And I would just conclude, Madam Chair, by saying, again, voters like options. They, at least in my experience, have really appreciated the opportunity to vote early if they so choose. This just continues to expand on that right for Marylanders to exercise their vote at a time that is more convenient for them. So I would ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. We are, any questions for Delegate Lutke? Delegate Hornberger?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and definitely appreciate, because we're in that lowest tier, very large county, 100,000. We have 1 voting site. It's by the Delaware line. Right. So I appreciate that effort. My concern, and I don't know if I'm going to be phrasing this the right way, how do we legislatively avoid the gerrymandering of the voting sites?
So, this bill would not change how voting sites are currently selected. They're currently selected at the local level by our local boards of elections. Right. Frankly, in some counties that has, including my own, has created some conflicts.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to pose that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's from a policy perspective, I would see that as a different question that we need to try to resolve at some point. Try to make sure that, voters have maximum voice in the selection of those sites, and to make sure that all counties, blue and red counties alike, people feel like they have a chance to have a say about where those sites should be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for Delegate Lutke? All right, seeing none, I'll invite 3 people who signed up favorable. First, Joanne Antoine.
Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee. For the record, Joanne Antoine, Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of House Bill 745, which would change the formula that establishes how many early voting centers jurisdictions are required to have during elections. As you all know, early voting has grown to be very popular throughout the state. Even during the pandemic in the general election, those voters who chose not to vote by mail overwhelmingly went in person during the early voting period. I think we even broke a few records in both elections during those days. But even with this growing popularity, there are certain groups of voters that continue to face unnecessary hurdles when they want to go vote early. We heard stories from some voters last session. Daniel Caroma, for example, in Montgomery County, highlighted, White Oak and the growing Black community there, many of them being immigrants, new citizens, and the hurdles that they were having to face in order to get to an early voting location. When they were able to go using public transportation, it was a commute of over 40 minutes. And a lot of times they were faced with long lines at that nearby location. And for the voter who worked double shifts, right, 16-hour days, and they were limited to the weekends, there really was very little public transportation available to them. So we have a responsibility where we can to remove hurdles and to allow for more voters to vote early. This bill does just that. It would give Montgomery County, for example, an additional 2 locations. In my testimony, I mentioned Baltimore City since the council or the then council had recommended an additional vote center. It looks like the fiscal note says that Baltimore City would be one of the jurisdictions that would get an additional early voting location as well. So we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Next, we have Barbara Desmond.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and distinguished representatives. I am Dr. Barbara Desmond and have come today on behalf of the Maryland State NAACP in support of House Bill 745, which proposes an increase in the number of early voting centers throughout Maryland. I became involved in my first voter registration campaign for African Americans in 1959 under the leadership of former delegate and civil rights champions, Ms. Victorine Q. Adams, as well as Ms. Irma Dixon and Ms. Verda Welcome, who were the first African American women elected to the Maryland House. For too many years, most Americans have been limited to the opportunity to vote to one day. As of 2020, voter turnout was 62%. Although this represents a dramatic difference over the 37% turnout in 2014, it could still be better. Data showed that the #1 reason that Americans didn't vote was that they were too busy. Voters either had to work or did not have time to stand in long lines. Knowing the difficulty that this causes for numerous voters, some states have passed laws that permitted voters to vote on other days prior to Election Day. This approach has proved to be more convenient. However, regrettably, there's another side to this political coin. In recent times, this nation, there have been rising efforts to suppress voting opportunities, especially targeting African Americans. Almost a decade ago, some states started restricting or limiting the early voting days and sites to the detriment of voters in general and to African Americans in particular. Contrary to negative propaganda, the Brennan Center noted early voting eases congestion on Election Day, leading to shorter lines, improved poll worker performance, and improved voter satisfaction. Lincoln once stated, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Throughout the history of this country, denial of the right to vote has been a prime source of division. As for cost, many have paid a much higher price in pursuit of democracy, and it's been worth it. Beyond the practical cost benefit, this legislation will serve to reassure minorities and all citizens in Maryland that they have a voice, that their engagement is welcome, and that they are important to Maryland in its determination to manifest the most essential element of a true democracy. And as an African American, I know it, the right to vote. Therefore, the Maryland NAACP humbly requests a favorable report from the committee on House Bill 745, and we thank Delegate Lukey for sponsoring this bill. God bless you and stay safe.
Thank you, Dr. Desmond. And then we have David Naiman. Oh, David, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I guess I'm proving I'm a baby boomer. Thank you, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, Chair Wilkins, Majority Leader Lukey, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is David Naiman. I'm the Secretary of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. I'm here today only on behalf of myself in strong support of House Bill 745. I hold the one position on our board that must be held by a member of the board minority, which means that I don't belong to the political party of the governor. But in our county, my political party represents 60% of the county's registered voters. If I look familiar to you and you're not from Montgomery County, it may be because I was in Annapolis in January of 2020 advocating for legislation for an additional specific early voting site at the White Oak Community Center. This bill takes a much more comprehensive approach across the state, determining the number of early voting sites based on a better formula of the number of registered voters in each jurisdiction. As I told you a year ago, on General Election Day in 2018, 57 Montgomery County polling places, about a quarter of all of our polling places, had peak waiting times of more than the 30-minute national standard. And in 12 election day polling places, including 3 along the Route 29 corridor in eastern Montgomery County, peak waiting times exceeded 1 hour. And in fact, in one case, exceeded 2 hours. 2020 was obviously a very different story, but I don't know how much we can generalize based on the 2020 experience. I also don't think any of us can know for sure what 2022 will look like and what special circumstances we will face, whether it's adverse weather conditions or adverse public health conditions or whatever else may come up. But whatever those conditions are, early voting helps to shorten the lines at the polling places on election day. We found that in 2020 for sure, as many people who were seeking the in-person experience of voting chose to vote early voting who otherwise would have voted on election day, but were trying to avoid the election day crowds. You all have also helped to shorten the lines on election day by passing out of your committee in bipartisan fashion a bill to expand the morning hours of early voting, adding the hours from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. every day in non-presidential election years. That also will help to shorten the lines on election day. And of course, in the current situation, which we hope will not be in place for the 2022 elections, lines are not only an inconvenience, they are a potential health hazard. So giving voters these choices are not only is a question of they feel better about the voting experience, but they also it may alleviate some of their stress related to the public health situation as well. So I thank you for your attention to this important issue, and to Delegate Lutke for sponsoring this and for his longtime interest in election issues. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Naiman. Are there any questions for Ms. Antoine, Dr. Desmond, or Mr. Naiman? All right, thank you all very much. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to favorable with amendment. We have Reverend Kobe Little.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair. I'm Reverend Kobe Little, Vice President of the Maryland State Conference of the NAACP and the Political Action Chair. We actually are in support of this legislation. You've heard the testimony from Dr. Barbara Desmond, and I'll just add, I'm glad to see Delegate Lutke that Baltimore City will also be receiving an additional early voting center. So thank you for your work. Good to see the members of the committee, and thank you for your strong work in support of democracy. Post January 6th, we know just how important it is to strengthen our laws around voting and democracy in ways that increase the franchise rather than decreasing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Little. Any questions? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to the unfavorable. We have Kevin Canelli from MACO.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Canelli here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in opposition to House Bill 745. You have my written testimony. I'll be brief. First of all, MACO does not raise any policy objections with the goals of this bill. Our concerns are merely practical and cost-driven. The bill places a substantial administrative and cost burden on the local boards of elections, whose functions are supported by county funding. And without state resources to offset these potentially large costs, the bill represents an unfunded mandate on county governments. Early voting centers entail substantial costs for equipment purchases, leases, equipment storage, transportation, staff compensation, and training, as well as other overhead. And all of these costs are nearly fully borne by county governments. And as you all know, under current law, counties have no choice to fund these costs, and they compete with limited local funds for essential public services. So we're happy to work with the committee to figure out some language on how we can reduce the burden on county governments a bit. But as such, the bill places a costly mandate on county governments to carry out a new state policy. And without the proper funding and resources to suitably implement the bill's requirements, MACO urges the committee to issue an unfavorable report on House Bill 745.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Canelli? Thank you. Seeing no questions, we next have Catherine Berry here from Mayo, signed up for informational testimony. or maybe just to answer questions from the locals. I'm not sure. Ms. Berry? I'm looking, I don't see her back on the Zoom, and she definitely did not have a great connection earlier. So I believe she provided written testimony as well. Seeing no other questions, we're done with the hearing on House Bill 745. Moving on to House Bill 949, Delegate Washington.
Madam Chair, which bill was that again? I have two bills today. So we're on Bill 7.
949.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Alonzo Washington here to present on House Bill 949. House Bill 949 is a bill that you all have seen before. In this committee, it clarifies Maryland campaign law to grant membership entities additional flexibility in how they collect campaign-related donations with their membership dues. Currently, membership organizations such as the Maryland Realtors charge members for a political contribution along with their membership dues. Unlike the other portion of membership dues, political contributions to the PAC must be voluntary. The bill doesn't otherwise affect any contribution paid outside of the member dues billing. In addition, for the first time, the bill places a cap on the amount of the political contribution paid with the dues bill, limiting it to no more than 25% of the total dues. Bill Castelli from the Maryland Realtors is here to give any additional details for the bill. For these reasons, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 949, and thank you for being patient with me as I found my testimony. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any questions for Delegate Washington? All right, seeing none, we do have one person signed up, and that is, sorry, I can't find my list. Bill Castelli, of course, who you mentioned. Mr. Castelli? Are you here? I don't see him here, Delegate Washington.
Okay, well, then I guess we're
done. We'll move on to the next bill, House Bill 955.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 955 is a bill that this committee has heard multiple years in a row from me. This bill represents an attempt to mitigate the security vulnerabilities within Maryland's absentee voting system. And I know we don't call it absentee voting anymore, it's mail-in voting. The legislation restricts online absentee ballots or online ballot deliveries to only uniform voters, overseas voters, voters with disabilities, or any other voters who would be unable to vote if they could not receive an absentee ballot electronically. As many of you know, again, this is an attempt of securing our system of online ballot deliveries. And I urge a favorable report for this bill. And I know there's some amendments that are out there that could make this bill a little bit more to consolidate some of the issues that people have been bringing up to us over the last couple of years. So there are amendments that I will propose to the subcommittee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. And going back to your last bill for a moment, House Bill 949, I believe Mr. Castelli just arrived if he wants to testify on that bill. Mr. Castelli. I was told he was here, but I still don't see him. Thank you, Delegate. And going back to your last bill for a moment, House Bill 949. I'm sorry, who is speaking?
Charlotte Cooper.
We're the only people signed up are Bill Castelli. I was told he was here. Otherwise, we're going back to 955. Okay. We will go back to 955. You were done, Delegate Washington, is that correct?
Correct.
Any questions for Delegate Washington? All right, thank you. We'll go on to Rebecca Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm Rebecca Wilson, co-director of Save Our Votes, Secure, Accessible, Verifiable Elections for Maryland, testifying in support of HB 955. This bill reserves electronic delivery of absentee ballots for voters who need to receive their ballots that way. The labor-intensive processing required for internet-delivered ballots places a large burden on local election officials and introduces risks into the process. Did the vice chair introduce this bill?
Yes.
Okay, I thought he introduced the previous bill. Okay, sorry.
Both.
Okay. Pages 3 and 4 of my written testimony show the differences in how absentee ballots are handled. The left side shows a ballot delivered to the voter by mail, and the right side shows a ballot delivered online. An absentee ballot mailed to the voter is sent with a pre-addressed return envelope that has a barcode with a voter ID number and a place for the voter to sign and date the oath. These ballots are easy to track and easy to provide status updates to the voter. When the elections office receives the voted ballot, they use a barcode scanner to enter the receipt into the voter's record. And without opening the envelope, they can make sure the oath was signed. And if not, they can notify the voter to correct it. When these absentee ballots are canvassed, the envelope is opened, the ballot is removed and counted by the scanner, and mailing the ballot back is free. Handling ballots delivered online is much more complex. The SBE sends the voter an email with a link to download their ballot. This email may go to the voter's spam folder or may not be noticed by the voter. This may be why the return rate on these ballots is 74% in the past election compared to 89% overall for absentee ballots. Worse still, it could be sent to a fraudulent email address without the voter even knowing it was requested. The voter logs in using information that is often publicly available on the internet. The voter may mark their ballot online or may download and mark it by hand. Either way, the voter must download and print the ballot, sign the accompanying oath, and then mail it back in an envelope that they have to supply, and they have to address it themselves. When the elections office receives it, they can't tell if the oath was signed without opening the envelope, and they can't easily enter that received ballot into the system for tracking. The voter printed ballot can't be counted by the scanner. It must first be hand marked on a ballot the scanner can read. The voter's identity is known while the ballot is transcribed, violating the privacy of the voter. The photos on page 5 of my testimony show this process. This laborious, inefficient, and risky
Thank you,
process,
Ms. Wilson. If you could please wrap up.
Okay, it should be reserved, as most states do, for absentee voters who need
Your
to
last
receive their
sentence.
ballots electronically. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Janet Millinson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. I'm Janet Millinson, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Maryland, which has 1,500 members across the state. The League believes our election system should be accessible, fair, secure, and fiscally responsible. This bill can help achieve those goals, and here's how. First, although internet-delivered ballots have a number of shortcomings, they're necessary for UOCAVA voters, people with certain disabilities, and anyone whose circumstances dictate it. Reserving web-delivered ballots for the use of these groups is similar to how we reserve certain parking spaces and bathroom stalls for people who use wheelchairs or have an infant in a stroller. It's a matter of accessibility and fairness. On the other hand, as you know, these electronically delivered ballots have to be manually duplicated at the local Board of Elections. Voter printed ballots can't be read by the high-speed scanners because ballots need to be on special paper with the proper size, weight, and precisely placed timing marks. As a result, bipartisan teams of canvass workers must duplicate each voter printed ballot onto an official form. This can take from 3 to 6 times as long as processing a regular mailed ballot. In the 2020 general election, Montgomery County needed to duplicate more than 30,000 voter printed ballots, a nearly 60% jump from the 2016 general election. Statewide, the number of web-delivered ballots sent out in 2020 soared to 164,000 from 87,000 in 2016, an increase of almost 90%. Of course, many voters chose internet delivery because they worried about receiving their ballot on time via the Postal Service. They didn't realize that duplicating a ballot compromises their privacy and introduces the risk of errors because the voter doesn't have a chance to verify that the copied ballot is correct. Also, when huge numbers of voter printed ballots are returned to the BOE, more canvassers must be hired and additional space found for them to work securely yet open to public observation. Our local boards of elections did a heroic job in 2020 and the election was certified on time, but we don't want their staffs or their budgets to be stressed like that again. Most voters should plan to use the traditional options of voting in person or getting a ballot by mail. Let's reserve web delivery of ballots for voters who truly need it and make that process as secure, private, and accessible as possible. The League of Women Voters therefore urges a favorable report on House Bill 955. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Cyril Draffin.
Hello, my name is Cyril Draffin, and I serve as member of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council's Critical Infrastructure Subcommittee, and these comments present my personal views. I'm speaking in support of House Bill 955 pertaining to election law, and I have 4 points. First, Maryland's absentee ballot system is one of the least secure of any state in the United States. The risk is that personal data can be cheaply obtained on the black market, making it difficult to determine whether a ballot printed from the internet came from a specific registered voter, and also difficult to do an audit on a disputed ballot. Second, as you've heard, the Maryland election process can be overwhelmed if many people use internet absentee ballots, which are complex to process and must be hand counted on new forms for the voting machines to read. With over 160,000 ballots that went through the internet in the general election, this is extremely burdensome to the local boards of elections. And it's more of a question about delays in the certification, privacy, and errors than cost. And the cost to the mail ballots from the state does not seem that much. Third, regular voters can still get absentee ballots by mail or in person, which is a much more secure way of doing it. The bill allows qualified service members, overseas voters, people with disabilities, and others who need a ballot this way in order to vote. Fourth, the lack of action by Maryland's legislators on this bill may create a public relations nightmare if there's a cybersecurity hacking problem or an election challenge to the validity of Maryland's hard to certify printed ballots, in addition to the privacy issues you've heard today. In summary, to beef up election cybersecurity and to substantially reduce the use of non-machine readable, hard to verify ballots in this increasingly litigious time, I strongly encourage a favorable report on House Bill 955 and the committee's continued attention to cybersecurity for elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Purvi Vora.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and other committee members. My name is Purvi Vora, and I'm a tenured professor of computer science at the George Washington University. My area of expertise is voting system security, and I very enthusiastically support House Bill 955. I've testified here before, and the current approach to online ballot delivery is very vulnerable to a bad actor, whether a nation state, a domestic or international group, or just an individual. Accurate personal information is easily found in the dark market. Using personal information on voters, it is easy to impersonate them and request online ballot delivery to fraudulent email accounts. The ballots can then be printed, completed, and mailed. These requests and completed ballots would appear legitimate to the state because they would use authentic credentials. It is trivial to hide IP addresses, preventing the identification and tracking of requesting computers and their locations. Those who say they will detect such requests, but need to keep their detection techniques secret, are like those who developed the app in Iowa last year, voicing a misplaced overconfidence. If bad actors wished to create chaos and distrust, they would target regular voters, and many would show up on election day to find a vote had been cast on their behalf. Many other attacks are also possible, including attempts to change the outcome of narrow margin primary elections in Maryland. There is no technical means to prevent such attacks. This bill makes an important change that reduces the attack surface, thus limiting the amount of possible damage, and with that, the incentive to bad actors to go through the effort of carrying it out. It allows all voters who need online ballot delivery to use it. Thus, the voted ballots would not be restricted to a single demographic. It benefits all because all would suffer were such an attack to occur. I have testified thrice in 2018, 2019, and 2020 in favor of similar bills that did not pass. This is baffling. Please do not risk the disruption of your elections. Please vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We have one more before we take questions for this group. Lynn Garland.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Garland, and I'm an independent advisor on the security and accuracy of voting systems. Regarding internet delivery of blank absentee ballots, Maryland is out of line with other states. Almost no other state allows all voters to receive blank absentee ballots over the internet. Such delivery has both security and operational issues. Maryland's internet ballot delivery system is not secure. Maryland's overconfident if it thinks it can prevent or detect attacks on this system. Credentials like Social Security number and date of birth used to authenticate voters are widely available on the internet. They can be obtained by international and domestic bad actors. Nothing Maryland can do can take back this information. Bad actors can impersonate Maryland voters on a large scale from anywhere in the world. This bill reduces the number of voters who request such ballots, thereby reducing the attack surface and the number of ballots to hand copy. Very importantly, the bill continues to allow all absentee voters to use the convenient online tools to request their ballot, and it continues to offer internet blank ballot delivery to all voters who really need it to vote. Last year, in support of a similar bill, I wrote, if many voters switched to absentee voting, the volume would be unmanageable. Nothing precludes absentee ballot usage from going up even tenfold to 50% of the voted ballots. Well, as you know, that's exactly what happened. In the last election, almost exactly 50% of voters voted absentee. In 2020, anticipating the enormous workload to hand copy these ballots, the SBE discouraged voters from requesting them through a successful voter outreach campaign. The campaign reduced the percentage of internet delivery to 10% from 36% in 2018. Still, there were 3 times as many of these ballots to hand copy as in 2018. Maryland only finished counting its ballots November 23rd, one of the last states to finish despite being the first allowed to start processing. As part of the voter outreach campaign, State Administrator Lamone advised, receiving your ballot by mail is free and more convenient than receiving it by email. To save time and money, request that your ballot be mailed. This will also make Maryland's vote counting process more efficient because local election judges will not have to hand copy ballots. In line with this advice and in line with the practices of almost all other states, please support HB 955 to reserve internet delivered ballots for those who need it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garland. And there is actually one more person testifying in support before we take questions. Mr. Charlie Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for introducing this important bill, and members of the committee. I just want to say that every few months I get a notice from one of these big companies like Equifax or my insurance company, my university, that X million, X 100 million identities have been stolen. So I just want to bring this home. I think you all must get them too. And so when the experts here testify that they have your ID and they can put it together with your email address, I hope this really hits home with you that they have your birth date and they have your social security number. And if a bad actor decides to put all this together and request 500,000 absentee ballots, we haven't had this. So you're being asked to protect against something that hasn't happened. But if it does happen, it's not going to happen a few hundred or a few thousand. It's going to happen on a massive scale. So it's very important to plug this hole and then leave the availability of this kind of process for those who really need it. And please issue a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Do any members of the committee have any questions of this group? I don't think I see any, but feel free to speak up. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand the gavel for my first time back over to Chair Kaiser.
Excellent job, Delegate Wilkins. Now we do have 2 more people testifying, and then I'm passing it to you, Delegate Washington. We do have David Naiman, favorable with amendment.
Thank you very much, Chair Kaiser. My name is David Naiman. I'm a member of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. I'm speaking only for myself. I have to admit that I have very mixed feelings on the subject of internet delivery ballots. I've lived with them since I joined the board in 2011. I am definitely not fond of the amount of time it is taken of my life to hand duplicate all those ballots. I have often referred to it as we have a 21st century technology by which we send ballots to voters and a 17th century technology that we use to hand duplicate them. But all that being said, I do have a number of comments about this that I wanted to bring to your attention. I personally have a great deal of difficulty with treating different voters differently. The one advantage that the current system has is that all voters are being treated the same. I think that we should think really hard before we try to have local boards of elections making decisions that potentially could treat people differently. The standard that is in the bill for a voter to get a ballot who is not a military or overseas voter or a disabled voter it's any other voter who would be unable to vote if the voter could not receive an absentee ballot electronically. I would virtually guarantee that different Board of Elections members would view that standard differently. What does it mean to be unable to vote? How hard is it to vote on election day? What do you mean you don't have transportation? There are some members of boards who don't understand what the obstacles are to voting in person. I think that we need to have alternatives available for those who can't or don't trust the US mail system. Quite frankly, at the moment, I would probably put myself in that category. Although local US mail officials were very cooperative with us during the last election, I think we all know that national officials have done a lot to slow down the mail. And I read recently that they're talking about increasing the cost of mail while also slowing down service. And I think we have to think about that. 65% of Montgomery County's so-called mail-in ballots, and thank you, Delegate Plakovich-Carr, for renaming them, but 65% of the mail-in ballots were actually returned at drop boxes, which gives you a pretty good sense that a lot of people were concerned about using the US mail system. We also need to have expeditious alternatives for those whose ballots don't arrive in the mail or otherwise get lost. And I think we need to give people that opportunity. And I'm concerned that a large number of the people who currently rely on this system will be young people who are used to doing all of their life online. So what would I do? A couple of things. I think that my friend Lynn Garland, with whom I sometimes have interesting discussions about this subject, made a very good point. We had a public education campaign that made a huge difference in the use of these ballots. And we basically told anyone who would listen what the problems are. And many people faced with the choice of having to have their own printer, their own ink, their own envelope, their own stamp, and figuring out where the ballot should be addressed, chose instead to get the ballot in the US mail. So if you were to mandate that kind of a public education campaign, you would have a far greater chance of lowering the numbers without preventing it for those people who feel like this is an option that they feel they need to have. Then the last
Mr. Naiman, I have to stop you. So what's your last summarizing sentence?
My last sentence was just that one thing that you could do that would improve security is change the system of how Maryland driver's license numbers are selected, because they are easy to figure out. If I have your full name and your date of birth, I can probably tell you from an internet site what your driver's license number is.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Naiman? All right, thank you. And then I was looking again for Miss Berry, but again, given her bad connections, and she was just informational from our group Mayo. So we are done with the hearing on House Bill 955, and I'll turn it back over to Delegate Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We, members of the committee, we're going to move on to House Bill 759. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the members. This is a bill that I've had before on risk limiting audits, and it's a different kind of auditing procedure, and it requires some people who are good at mathematics or statistics. But to give a little bit of the story, it would require looking at like one statewide race, one county-wide race in probably every jurisdiction, and then some other races, and do a type of manual audit. And if only if there's some kind of differential. If you lost by 500 votes and then they reviewed the ballots in just some part of your county and 2 votes changed, there's probably no reason to continue looking at those numbers for your race or anybody else's. But certainly if a section of your county was manually audited and you only lost by 10, and in that small manual audit 5 votes changed towards you, clearly we should do more of this. So I would just tell everyone, of all things, to reference Wikipedia, but they do have a great article on how risk limiting audits work and kind of the statistical measure of what you should use, given how close a given race is and how many votes you should take a close look at. And then if there's no problem found in a small sample, you stop. But if a large enough problem is found, you then audit a larger number. Ideally, we would do this before certification, and this would deal with a lot of other issues that we have in regards to the timing with elections. I think the state board will tell you that they have a current auditing procedure, and we've seen it before, where they take a picture of the ballots and they look at them. But then the audit of those ballots is just another picture of those ballots. And it's not really a different type of check on the process. I would also point out that no other state does it that way with this kind of audits, and that risk limiting audits are seen as the, can't think of the right term, but it's seen as the best type of audit that's out there. I think the counties, if they, I believe they are opposed, will say it has to do with the cost, but I think even they will admit that this is known to be the best type of auditing system for our elections. I do believe that there might be some amendments being offered to maybe slow this down and have the local boards of election take a closer look at this, not to study it to see if we should do it, but study it to see how we would do it, which is a very different perspective, and to make sure that they have the time to figure this out. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I urge the committee to support House Bill 759.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, any questions?
Oh, gold standard. Thank you. Someone just texted me. That's it. Gold standard. I can't say who sent it to me though.
Is that a bingo term you're saying, Madam Chair?
Not a bingo term. I'm just
Okay,
saying
got it. Wasn't sure. Okay.
a term of art.
Got it. All right, cool. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's go to our first speaker, Purvi Bora. Ms. Bora.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and other committee members. That was a great description, Madam Chair, of the problems with the current process and of the proposed replacement risk limiting audits. Congratulations to the committee on a strong audit bill that serves the interests of Maryland's voters in the form of House Bill 759. The literature in the field of election security is clear and nonpartisan, as I've testified here several times. Computerized election systems are vulnerable to both error and intentional alteration. A software image audit, such as the one Madam Chair described and is being currently is the only audit performed before certification of Maryland's elections, relies on data provided by the voting system. It relies on the images provided by the voting system and is hence also vulnerable. It cannot be the basis of an audit of the election outcome, though it may be useful in identifying problems with equipment, such as Maryland has experienced that benefit previously. But it cannot be the basis of an audit of the election outcome, precisely because it is entirely software and therefore vulnerable to the same problems that the voting system is vulnerable to. What is needed is a pre-certification audit which relies on manual examination of the paper ballots. Now, the most consequential error that an audit can make is to fail to detect an incorrect election outcome when it is presented with one. And a risk-limiting audit is one where we can pre-specify the largest acceptable chance that such an error would occur. So we might say that the chance of such an error can be no larger than 10%, for example. The audit would then examine only the number of ballots necessary to achieve this pre-specified chance. For elections with wide margins, such as all the statewide contests in Maryland in 2020, such a risk-limiting audit would have a smaller workload than one that manually examined 2% of the ballots as currently required. So in fact, for Maryland's statewide elections, the recent ones, and typically, you would be examining fewer ballots. It would be less effort than currently the 2% examination that is performed after certification. So this bill does require pre-certification and pre-certification audits, which is good, through the manual examination of ballots. It also requires that an election outcome found to be incorrect should be corrected and that the audit be transparent. Now, the bill requires that the state administrator convene a work group. As in many other states, the work group can assist in the design of the audits, given specifics, such as, for example, the technology used, the manner in which ballots are processed and tallied, the number and sizes of counties, and so on. Such a report was recently prepared by the Brennan Center for the State of Arizona, and it proposed a combination of 2 different types of audits. I have a few friendly suggestions in my written testimony. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have questions or I can help in any way. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
On a very fine bill.
Thank you. We'll have our next speaker, Ms. Joanne Antoine.
Good afternoon again. For the record, Joanne Antoine of Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of House Bill 759, which would replace the manual audit process that we have with RLAs or risk limiting audits. I don't want to be repetitive since both Purvi and obviously the chair have done a great job of highlighting what risk limiting audits are, why it's important. As an organization, I'd just say that, we agree that this is a critical reform, that's needed to ensure that the results of our elections actually reflect the will of Maryland voters. If you look at our testimony, I've provided a hyperlink to a report that recently was released by our Common Cause Rhode Island office. Rhode Island is one of a handful of states that uses risk limited audits, and they highlighted their 3 successful pilot programs leading up to the 2020 election and really provide a roadmap on implementation, eliminating the need to even study, what the best risk limiting audit process looks like for Maryland. Election security experts agree that this is the gold standard. Our election security person in our national office actually just emailed me because she saw this bill and she is excited to help in any way possible. So we urge a favorable report. And just also want to flag, I know that the bill has come before the committee again multiple times. I'm not clear what the pause or hesitation has been, but if there's some way that we can help with the bill, make changes, we have experts that are really ready to assist if you all are ready to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. I think your testimony is going to help with that. So thank you for that. Ms. Rebecca Wilson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Washington and Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Rebecca Wilson, co-director of Save Our Votes, Secure, Accessible, Verifiable Elections for Maryland. I want to congratulate the chair on this excellent bill. Currently in Maryland, our manual audits happen too late to correct any mistakes that might be detected in an audit before the election is certified. Risk limiting audits are a far more precise and statistically sound method of auditing based on the margin of victory in a race. So you audit more in a close race than you do in a very wide margin. And especially in elections that are close and hotly contested, these audits provide impartial data-based evidence that election results are accurate. At a time when public trust in government in general and elections in particular is at an all-time low, increasing the transparency and verification of election processes and procedures will help restore confidence in our elections, which are the very foundation upon which our democracy rests. We wholeheartedly urge your favorable report on HB 759. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Any questions of the last speakers? Seeing none, thank you all very much. Let's go to our next set of speakers, Lynn Garland.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. Again, I'm Lynn Garland. For background, I co-authored the Principles and Best Practices for Post-Election Tabulation Audits. This document has been endorsed by many organizations, including the American Statistical Association and the Brennan Center for Justice. I was also part of the team that planned and executed Rhode Island's risk limiting audit. I strongly support this bill. It improves the accuracy and security of Maryland's elections. Risk limiting audits can detect and correct errors or attacks that change the election outcome. Maryland's current manual audit and its automated audit have deficiencies that prevent them from reliably doing that. Maryland's manual audit just audits a fixed percent of ballots and may not look at enough ballots to discover problems in close contests. It has no mechanism for escalation if problems are discovered. And it occurs, as others have pointed out, long after certification, too late to change the winner if the wrong winner has been declared. True audits of voting systems rely on paper ballots verified by voters in order to get an independent assessment of the winner. But Maryland's automated audit does not rely on paper ballots that the voters have verified. First, the automated audit relies on images that are created by the voting system itself. That's not an independent audit. Second, the automated audit cannot truly audit ballots produced by ballot marking devices. Ballot marking devices produce a summary ballot of the voter selections with a QR code, like a barcode, that encodes the voter selections. The automated audit system can only read the QR code that the voter cannot verify. It cannot read the text that the voter could verify. Third, the automated audit system cannot read ballots that were delivered to voters over the internet and then printed at home. The local boards have to hand copy each of these ballots that we've discussed and scan the new ballots. The automated audit system only sees the images of the newly made ballot, which the voter has no opportunity to verify. The risk limiting audit required by this legislation addresses these problems. It requires human examination of the voter verified ballots that are independent of the voting system. It automatically escalates to make sure that any incorrect result is corrected, and it must be finished prior to certification so the correct winner is certified. This legislation helps ensure the election outcomes reflect the will of the people. Please support this very, very good bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next favorable speaker will be Mark Lindman.
Thank you. And thank you to the members of the committee. My name is Mark Lindeman. I'm interim co-director of Verified Voting, a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to strengthen democracy for all voters by promoting the responsible use of technology in elections. And today I testify in strong support of HB 759, which, as you've heard, would replace Maryland's current post-certification manual audits with risk-limiting audits. So risk-limiting audits have been endorsed by the National Academies, the Department of Homeland Security, and the US Senate Select Intelligence Committee, among others. They've been tested or implemented in at least 11 states so far, including 3 states that conducted official risk-limiting audits of the 2020 presidential election, and many other states are considering them. I have worked on risk-limiting audits since before they had a name, so I know way too much. And I've been honored to provide technical assistance in 6 of those states, including Rhode Island, which was mentioned, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I think you've heard from other speakers why risk-limiting audits are so useful and valuable, so I won't belabor those points. I just want to accentuate what I really like about HB 759. Briefly, the bill sets broad and realistic requirements for risk-limiting audits in Maryland, but it avoids the trap we've seen in some other legislation of over-specifying the details. Risk-limiting audits are highly flexible and adaptable. They've been successfully tailored for states with very different voting methods and election procedures. In Rhode Island, we even tailored the method between the presidential primary and the general election to accommodate changing circumstances. In our experience, risk-limiting audits turn out best when state and local election officials work together with people who are deeply familiar with this kind of audit. And HB 759 is designed to make sure that happens by creating a broad work group to offer specific recommendations on the audit regulations. That sensible collaboration will allow Maryland to find the best solutions for its circumstances and bolster public confidence in elections. So it's a very well-conceived bill. I congratulate you on it, and I'll be happy to assist you in any way I can.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you all very much. Our last speaker on the bill we'll have is Kevin Canelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Kevin Canelli here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties. We are opposed to House Bill 759, mostly because our local boards expressed a lot of concern around just questions of how this would work, including some were concerned that the audit would jeopardize the timely certification of election results. However, I'm really happy to hear Chair Kaiser say that, maybe there are some amendments here to figure out the how, not whether or not we should, but the how, because I would agree with the chair that this is the gold standard. So I think it's not a matter of if we're going to do this, it's when. And I think having the relevant stakeholders at the table to figure out the best way to do this is the right way to approach this bill. So while we are opposed, we're very much looking forward to working with the committee, our local boards, and the state boards to come up with a solution here. And we'd ask for an unfavorable report, but again, happy to work with you all moving forward because I do think this is something that's coming to Maryland, and it certainly is a gold standard in elections.
Nice save at the end, Mr. Canelli. It's like, no, I'm joking. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Members of the committee, that concludes the House bill hearing for House Bill 759. Our next bill is the continuation of Kaiser Palooza for House Bill 760.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. To everyone, House Bill 760, time for processing of absentee ballots. This bill came to me during a long conversation I had back in the fall or maybe early winter with Ms. Lynn Garland, who's on the today's Zoom, but not signed up for this bill. And we were talking about a lot of parts of election law, and I was concerned that we shouldn't count our absentee ballots before election day, but we should be able to do it sooner. And with a graphic she provided to me that I could share with the committee about all of the pre-step, all of the steps that happen before the counting, I thought we could be a little faster doing that. So the idea behind this, and it's true, this may not be as necessary in future elections when fewer people request mail-in ballots. I do think some people gain the appreciation for them, but I do think that others will go back to being there on election day. But I don't think the ballots should be counted in advance. And I think there was a similar bill a few weeks back, but to allow for all the steps before the counting, and that would be removing them from their envelopes, reviewing them. And these are normal stages that currently happen. This is not some added review, and the duplication that's already been discussed about some ballots needing to be fixed in some way. There have been questions of how do you ensure security? I think that's always a question that could be asked about the absentee ballots as they pile up for so many weeks. So clearly these would be opened already. So, you know, that's certainly a fair concern. I also believe that the locals would prefer, if this were to happen, to not just start 14 days before the election, but actually start 18 days, which would allow them to do some of this before early voting even starts. So some of that pre-work can be ready. So that's the bill in a nutshell, and ask for your favorable support on House Bill 760. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go on to our first speaker, Ms. Joanne Antoine.
For the record again, Joanne Antoine of Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of House Bill 760, which would allow for the pre-processing of mail-in ballots at least 14 days before Election Day. This again does not include tabulation. It would allow for local boards to remove the envelopes, remove the ballots from the envelopes, check to ensure that the ballots are actually in compliance, and from there, figure out what other further actions are needed outside of the tabulation. I'm sorry. But we support this. We believe that it will ensure election officials are not overwhelmed by mail-in ballots after Election Day. We know that because of the pandemic, more voters have used mail-in voting. We should expect not an overwhelming, but definitely an increase in the number of voters who will be voting by mail. I think if drop boxes become a permanent staple in the election, we might see even more making requests. And this again assists the local boards while allowing for results to hopefully be made available early or in a timely manner. The one friendly amendment we did have was around curing. If we are pre-processing ballots, the one advantage there is that we know whether or not the voter has forgotten to sign the oath that's included on the envelope. When we look at the rejection rates, normally it's because ballot has arrived late or the person has forgotten to sign. And in most instances, the voter intends to vote. They are a lot of times checking the very complicated instructions and somehow overlook and forget to sign. So the local boards providing some reasonable method for a voter to sign their ballot, sign their oath, not electronically, either I guess going in person or exploring whether or not we can deliver their oath electronically or by mail so that the voter can turn it in physically by mail, I think are all things that we leave at the discretion of the local board. But again, our biggest priority here is just providing that voter an opportunity to make sure their ballot is counted. And we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Berry. No Catherine Berry. Okay, any questions for Ms. Antoine? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Antoine, and thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Members of the committee, that concludes the public hearing for House Bill 760. We'll now move on to our final bill, House Bill 761. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This bill came to both myself and Senator Kagan back in the fall from our Montgomery County, from our executive's office, actually executive and counsel's office. And they were looking at a particular problem with public finance committees. So Montgomery County does have public financing for our executive and council. People don't have to use it. Quite a few candidates did use it in the last election. And as you may know, we had a very close county executive race that differed by just 70 votes. And there were also races, including one of our delegate colleagues, that differed by about 11 votes. So there were definitely some close races, but the close county executive race pointed out the problem of when people have recounts. A lot of times there's need for lawyers. There may be some data analysis. Maybe people have volunteers, or maybe they're paying people to watch at the Board of Elections, but people can't really fundraise, or certainly can't fundraise within the public financing system. They've pretty much already tapped out everyone they know. And so it would be pretty difficult. And so this came together to say, let's let people have a recount committee that would be separate from the other provisions and limitations within campaign financing. The more we talked about this bill, and thank you to Stan and thank you to Mr. Demarinis at the Board of Elections for guiding us through some rules that we would have to consider in these cases. But we started talking about maybe everyone should be able to have a recount committee, and that became a larger part of the conversation. You'll see this bill is now quite a few pages, but I would tell you that a lot of that is just ensuring that the rules and provisions for these recount committees have certain limits. We put a different limit in here, and people may think differently in terms of $2,000. But again, a lot of the pages are about the limits, the reporting requirements, the disclosure requirements, the details about late fees. So a lot of this just matches usual campaign finance law. So I just want to explain that, and a very well-written bill that very easily explains what all the procedures are. And as we continue talking even further on this topic, we wanted to increase the recount threshold. Right now it is 0.1%, and that's very low. And we were trying to use different real-life election results to say what would be the reasonable person standard of what should be acceptable. There was a county council race in Prince George's County, I believe in 2014, where they differed by 6 votes. And you know what? It was greater than the 0.1%. And I think we can all argue that 6 votes is a close race in just about every setting outside of picking who's the classroom monitor. Maybe then 6 isn't so close. But certainly it seemed to make more sense that there should be an automatic recount when we're a little bit higher, and then maybe even again allowing people at a greater differential to be able to pay for it. We certainly wouldn't want someone paying for a recount that differed by 5 or 6%. But you could also argue that once I hope my risk limiting audit bill becomes law within the next few years, and that we shouldn't have any concerns about big differentials. We'll already know that there's no difference there, but recounts sometimes show changes by a few votes. We could certainly all reach out to our colleague, Delegate Love, who I think in her recount, I think like a handful of votes changed. I think in her favor. I think she went from like 11 votes to maybe 19 after everything was recounted. So again, I think there's value in having that broader conversation with our excellent election law subcommittee chair and the rest of her subcommittee to say, you know, what really does make sense and what is the right public policy for the state on where a recount threshold should be. So I leave that to everyone else on the to have that great discussion. And then I ask for your favorable support on House Bill 761.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any questions? Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick question. So the law numbers on the smaller races, obviously the percentages don't add, it's only a few votes, but I was looking at the fiscal note. Would this scale all the way up to like a congressional or a statewide race?
You know, we were thinking that it still should, that 0.1, that when we had that governor's race back in the 90s where they differed by like 5,000 to 7,000, that I think, in fact, it was over the 0.1% threshold. But
Right. The Bongino one was, I think, within the, in other words, they could have asked for it if they wanted to, but they declined.
Okay. I guess I'm just thinking of the governor's race from 94, where I think people understand across a whole state when a race only differs by about 5,000 votes, that's close and that there could be a margin of error in every jurisdiction and different problems. So that 0.1% threshold maybe doesn't make sense. But again, I leave that to the subcommittee to finalize that number. But I think it should be more than what it is. We did have that conversation. Should it be different for smaller races and larger races? Right. And maybe it should be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Delegate Wilkins for next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Demarinis, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Okay. I'm just trying, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to understand, Mr. Demarinis. So currently, let's say I run in a race, it's very close. I would like to get a recount taken. So currently in my current campaign committee, I couldn't just fundraise and say, you know, please donate. I need an attorney. I want to do a recount and have my supporters donate to my current committee. I just want to understand the need for, you know, this process of having the recount committee.
So one, it started, as the chair mentioned, from the public financing part for it. So in Montgomery County, there was a very tight, and we had a recount for a county executive. The public finance candidate was thinking about trying to see, can I go back to the same contributors I already went to to help with financing the recount? And the answer was yes, but he was only, because he was in the public financing committee, the individuals were limited to $250. He had already maxed out to a lot of people for that. So that committee was bumping up against the fact that they had no funds left available to them going forward with it. Additionally, there was a recount that was going on in Baltimore County at the same time there. And the entire recount laws and contributions made are outside the current $6,000 contribution limits for committees. They can raise money and then spend it separately from their accounts. So it's basically an unregulated entity currently. And it's one sentence in Title 13. And Stan, it's not even a full sentence, it's a part of a sentence for that. So this basically gave a lot of meat to it, and also brought in disclosure and contribution limits to the entire process, which is a very highly contested area, which is recounts at this point here, because the margins are so close. So, and the disclosure parts are beneficial for the public as well, because in a normal situation, if they do it on campaign finance reports, it could be well after the recount is done by the first time you would ever see any of the disclosures. Here, it's done when you file for the petition. It's done periodically so that it's relevant to the period in question.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions for the sponsor of the bill? Seeing none, thank you all very much. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, very much. Our last speaker on this bill is Joanne Antoine.
For the record, Joanne Antoine of Common Cause Maryland, testifying again in support of House Bill 761, which would require that candidates who are qualified to petition for a recount, that they establish these contested election committees. Jared pretty much covered everything I planned on saying. You know, this is a straightforward bill where we are creating a system similar to candidate committees or ballot issue committees. It requires disclosure of donations and disbursements, and as well as establishes penalties for failure to disclose. I think more importantly here is the transparency piece. Voters should be able to, in real time, see who is spending money to fund these recounts. And I think more importantly, we want to ensure that candidates who have made the decision to run on the strength of their constituents on these small dollars, that they are able to not only run competitive races, but that they're not left at a disadvantage when it comes to the recount process. So allowing for local jurisdictions to put regulations in place that are still in line with the overall spirit of the program, again, ensures that as Howard County and Montgomery County prepare to use the programs again, and for the first time in HOCO, that candidates are able to run and hopefully win under these races. So we urge a favorable report and thank Chair Kaiser for introducing the bill.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Antoine? Seeing none, thank you very much. Members of the committee, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 761. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Washington. Earlier in and out, we had trouble getting Mr. Castelli in on your bill on House Bill 949. So wanted to give him a chance to speak. He was in the waiting room, then he was in the waiting room. So technical difficulties on our end, and we apologize. Mr. Castelli?
Thank you, and apologies from me too. I think the technical may have been on my my other laptop. So just very quickly, you have our written testimony, and this was, thank you to Delegate Washington for introducing the legislation. This is a clarification, or not really a clarification, but a change in the law. About a year and a half ago, we approached the Board of Elections with a change that we wanted to make in terms of how we charge for our dues with our members. Along with our dues, we also charge for a voluntary political contribution. And so we talked to the Board of Elections about it. They felt that it was not clear in the law that what we wanted to do was permitted. And so we drafted some language. They indicated to us they would like to have a cap on the amount of that contribution as a percentage of the total dues. And so that's what this legislation is here today. What it would do is, currently when our dues are charged to our members, there's a voluntary political contribution. That's typically anywhere from $20 to $50. Members have a choice to do it, pay it or not. And what this bill would do is they would still have the choice to give the political contribution or not. But if they chose not to, they would still pay the $20, only it would go to a non-campaign related activity in the association. So that's the summary of the bill, and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Castelli? All right, want to thank you all very much. We are done with hearing for today. I do want to give the subcommittee chairs a chance for any announcements. We do, of course, have a bill hearing tomorrow at 1:30. Are there any announcements from the subcommittees?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Yes, we'll be meeting tomorrow right before the public hearing.
Okay. What time? So 1 o'clock?
Yeah, let's say 1. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Delegate Wilkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Election Law Subcommittee will meet on February 18th, this Thursday, at 12:30 p.m. immediately after revenues.
Okay, thanks for announcing revenues too, because I don't see Delegate Lutke. Delegate Barnes?
Revenue, stay tuned, but we may have something this week.
Delegate Ebersole?
Early Childhood Subcommittee will meet tomorrow, the 17th at 12:30 p.m.
And Delegate Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not now.
Okay.
Later on this week.
All right, thank you. Any questions, anything for the good of the body? All right, thank you all very much. We'll stop taping and I'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good night.